Hi, this is the week number 7 of database management course, and I am sharing with you the week number 7 from the Blackboard. Uh, as you can see, we have the list of those usual objectives format, and then there's a instructional material, um, particularly the lesson plan, and there are the assignments. So if you download the lesson plan, you will see the lesson plan, which I'm going to go through in a minute. In terms of the assignments, let's get in there for a minute. There are some assignments that are assigned for you this week. There's a discussion question about a NoSQL, which I'll mention a little bit more. There's a couple of textbook questions, and then the last set of lab activity questions or assignments. I'd like to go through the lesson plan with you and go over a little bit more in detail. So a couple of the administrative items. This is week number 7, which means that this course will end at the end of next week. So you have only 2 weeks to go. And as I briefly hinted, this week's lab activities that are being assigned from the Microsoft SQL Server 2002 MCSA Guide lab book, this will be the last set of activity assignments. So no more lab activities from the book. Next week, which is week number 8, the only thing that is assigned is the final project, I should say. And so there's no, as we mentioned in the syllabus, there's no exam or paper due this course. So the only thing that is due after this week is the final project. A few words about this week and next week. As understandably and expectedly, these 2 weeks will be a little bit busy for all of us, for you to finish up and catch up and maybe get even ready for next term number 2 of the same semester. Same thing applies to me. And so I try to be very prompt in responding to your emails and assignment gradings. It may be a little bit delayed, not as prompt as before, which sort of started last week. But I just wanted to be upfront with you, and that's how it usually works out. So if you don't get an immediate response from me, it's not that I'm trying not to respond to you, but these last 2 weeks tend to be more hectic and busy than other weeks. So what this means for you is particularly, I think most of you already got started on your final project, which is great, but please don't wait until next week toward the end and say, oh, I'm ready to start, and expect a lot of time to be devoted to it from me. I'll do the best that I can, but I think that would be a losing proposition. And things that can go wrong will go wrong, as the Murphy's law goes. Particularly, the Blackboard may not be working at all times because everybody's trying to access it. Maybe the SQL fiddle may not work because millions of people are trying to access it around the world. So things are going to be a little hectic. So please try plan accordingly so that you don't get stuck on technical difficulties. Just a word about the final project. Stay in terms of the scope of your final project. Try to stay close to 5 tables. More tables you create, more records you will need, and more relationship you need to establish and troubleshoot. So you don't need to be ambitious. Just stick with the requirements and just get it to work, and that should be fine. I did post a sample work for you to view, so utilize that to your advantage. Let me kind of go there and show it to you. So if you go over to week number 8, here are two documents from previous student work that may be useful for you to look at. So if you download these two, you should get these two guys. So let me get rid of this one first. So here is a sample submission that you can look. So it gives you, this is a link that is shared with me from Lucidchart, which would be very helpful for me to go in and kind of look at them. So if you can do that, be sure to create your Lucidchart and then share with me, since you know my email address, and just put that link in there that I know that I can go check. Do take a screenshot of your Lucidchart so that I have a visual snapshot of that, and screenshot of the SQL Server export. You don't need to, just that I know that you selected this, and screenshot would be helpful. You probably need to copy the clipboards and paste it on here so that I know exactly what all the stuff is, because this screen does not tell you everything. It just tells you that it started, right? So copy and paste of that would be nice. And then you want to use a SQL Fiddle to test it out, and the insert statements that you need to utilize to create the records for your tables. You need to do all that, and maybe you can put, cut and paste your actual data as well as insert statements. And then if you want to, not if you want to, go over to the SQL Server, create the database. You can name it project or whatever you want to do, and then issue a sample select statement after you populate all this data, and then make sure that it executes. All right. Of course, that doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove everything's working. It just that gives you one demo that it is working for that particular statement. But at least that gives me an idea of where things are and that is working. Okay. So that's one sample. Another sample that I posted up here is something like this, very similar, and maybe it'll look a little bit different, but it's very similar in terms of its actual content. Here's the actual SQL statements and the data, copy of what's in the database, sample select statement, and the return. So hopefully they are useful for you if you want to have some idea what you want to do. So let me highlight this here. Great luck. Goals for this week is for us to kind of finish off all the little sections that we didn't get to cover, but just want to touch upon those guys. This course is not meant for us to become the DBA, but to have an idea of what they do, right? So these are the things that they often do, what they're assigned to do, but they don't get to do a whole lot. They usually give it out to other BAs to do it, but they do manage them. So chapter 19 of your textbook, understand how to monitor and tune the SQL Server. This should not be done on every day. It should be, should it be monitored? Yes, of course, it should be monitored. There should be usually a data, I should say, dashboard DBA looks at real time. But tuning the SQL Server is typically done as needed whenever you typically, because it's a reactionary in reality than proactive measure. They do tune it at the very beginning, and maybe it is set to be tuned on a regular basis, like once a month. But typically, it's more of a there's an issue, so could we improve it? Okay. Understanding a little bit about what data warehousing is all about, and then data mining and data marts are. So we'll talk a little bit about that. For the labs, two chapters, chapter 8, I think there's chapter 10 as well, because I do SQL monitoring tests. So 7, 8, and 10, how to do those things that I just mentioned. Let's talk a little bit about the assignments, discussion posting. There is uh, a thing called NoSQL. Do a brief search online as to what it is and give us, a brief summary. You don't need to write more than half a page. Give a couple paragraphs of what it is and maybe provide some link. Here's some links that you can take a look. Obviously, they're not exhaustive or even I don't have any particular preference at any one of them, or you can look at any other ones you like. But you should be aware of what the NoSQL is all about. There are a few questions that I ask you based on your reading of the chapter 31 and 34. As I mentioned before, what is the data warehousing, data mart, and data mining is. Basically, you collect data mining is you are mining for particular data analysis, whether it's a financial aid, student admissions, or um, your subscription to some apps or whatever, right? So, both the metadata and the actual data, you pay for subscription and get those items, and then you are going to mine them for your company or marketings or whatever you're doing. Datamart is specialized a particular segment that you don't want to have everything in all together as it is in the warehousing, but maybe for certain departments, as in like a little mart, right? Data warehousing is where you're housing all the data, and typically, you know, it's a huge. I just and here's one resource that I posted up for you to look at. Uh, Brief descriptions of what they are and how they're different. But I'll give you one example of data warehouse, how one school is using it and one organization is using it. So there's a data house analyst at a company where he, uh, at the end of the day, collects all the data from all the different databases, and after it is all uh, uh, sorted and collected or in a certain way, he runs a report. For example, runs a revenue report or expense reports or things like that. And in the morning, that fresh report is provided to the senior executives to look. And so the report is run against the data warehouse rather than live data. And that's because when you run a report against the live data, your report would be different because the data is changing. But if you run against the data warehouse, you should get the same result because it is a fixed, right? You collect all the data, you freeze it, and then you run the report. So we do that so that you will know, you will have a confidence on your actual report and that it ran fine, right? Um, and when uh, the executives run the report, they should be running both on the live data as well as the data warehouse, but they should not complain when they run against live data that it looks different because it is changing. So standard practice is for them to receive the report out of the data warehouse. But then the problem is it's a day old. It's yesterday's news. While that is a good starting point, a lot of times the executives want the live data or up to date data, right? So, but then you can't really do that because as soon as you run the data, it's old. No matter how live this is, reports is as soon as you run it, it's a second late, and so it could be changing, right? So they may be complaining that when I run this report, I get different. Well, because you run at a different time. But anyway, so That's one example. Let me talk a little bit about the lab activities. So one is 7.1 and a 7.4, configuring data collector. So let me pause for a second.